back. We are recording again at Wickerson Studios, and what I am doing is I'm not going into Visual Studio Code and using the hops and Flask server to do all this stuff. I think it is easiest to return to using ghpython scripts. And as you'll tell, that nothing right now needs an input, so X and Y are obsolete. But this is how I would learn ghpython in Grasshopper from now on. So what I'm going to do is probably take a look at things in here as needed. All you need is chat openai.com. So write in it, write a simple point script for ghpython node in Grasshopper for Rhino 3D using Rhino geometry. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to bring in Rhino 3D as R3, and it then will bring in Rhino geometry. Avoid using Rhino script syntax for right now, and I can show you that later on why to do that, but right now I'm using the Rhino common language. It's bigger, it's better, and you may as well use it. So I think it's fantastic. It'll make a definition, it'll make a function, create point, XYZ, it will use Rhino geometry and create that point and return that point. And in doing so, it will also try and create a point using the function, and then it will also which is basically what it does, and then it will try and output the point to the Rhino viewport, and you do not need that. If you do that, and you take a look in this script, you will have to comment out both the Rhino 3D as R3 because it won't recognize it, and you will have to comment anytime R3 is used. So instead of commenting those out each time, what I did, and it will produce a point. The point itself is right there. But all the geometries we'll get around to. I just wanted to show that it was a little more interesting. But it's not that complex. And you have to start debugging this as you go. So the first one generates a point, whoop-de-doo. And then it gives you a whole human context to what happens. But I said do not use Rhino 3D and do not output the point to the Rhino viewport. And so it did it again. And all I have to do is copy that code and throw that into a simple point script in Grasshopper, because that's not a simple point script going into Rhino. So what I end up doing is just getting my point here. I don't need to use this one right now. I will disable that, and this one will be up and running just fine. And then it talks a little human to me, but basically I want to go right back into talking to AI. Create a more complex script in a similar way. So follow the rules of what I just said, and you want to keep your screen going. Don't reset the thread, just keep adding to it. And what it does is here is a more complex script that creates a line and a plane in Rhino 3D using Rhino geometry namespace, because that's what I want to be using. And here's the script. Cut and paste right over into the ghpython node. I still don't need inputs, but it's a great opportunity for you to make things parametric. You can look in here for variables, and you of course can input the variables in your X, Y, and naming them. Now, if you don't know how to set access and you don't know how to set type hints, then watch anybody else teaching or myself on ghpython. But there you go. You got your line, and you have your grid, which are fabricated. Wonderful. So all I did was keep going, and it talks a little human to me. So I go down and I say, aha, there's a little bit of a problem here. Create a more complex script in a similar way, and here it says I'm going to create a sphere and a cylinder. And here's where I want to show you where the debugging starts to take effect. If I bring that in, it will have a problem with 2 arguments over 3, because ghpython just isn't smart enough, or it's not set right, and there's something in here. So when I go into that and I take a look at it, that script, and I'll bring it over here, as I go down, it says here that it wants 2 in line 16. It wants 2 arguments instead of 3. So something is wrong with 16. So what I do to debug it is I basically take line 16, I copy it, I paste it up here, and, well, not so much to start, but I want to leave the script as to what I wanted, which was this one. But then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say, okay, what is going on? Is cylinder an issue? Well, it's not. It's actually a thing. But when I go in here, ghpython has a way to debug. Just set up your parentheses and take a look at the constructors. And here's a constructor that needs a base circle and a circle. which then needs a base circle and a circle height and a float. So there's two different ways of kind of doing that. So I don't have a circle. I can't use it, and I can't get this down to 2 parameters. So in looking at that, I'm going to set this back to what it was. It gives me a little bit of a hint to where I need to go. And if you don't do this yourself, reach out to some developers. They'll do it for you. I'm going to close that, and I run it again by going back in. That's the text I need. It explains it, but something's wrong with this argument's not matching the numbers. So I went into here and I wrote it again. Let me bring it over. And when I rewrote it, I found I could go in, know that I need a base circle and a height. I hard-coded the height, at which you could then turn into a parameter as an input if you want, height and radius, and that would change everything. And maybe I'll show you an example of that, but I don't think I will because that's pretty basic. But I needed a base circle instead of what I had before. So before, I had a cylinder needing a base point, a vector, a height vector, and a radius, but it also was giving me a height vector. I didn't end up needing that. If I produced another variable, the base circle, then I could just take that from the radius. Then I could create the cylinder from the base circle and the height, which doesn't need to be a height vector, so I just hard-coded it in at 5.5. So you do need to learn how to debug, otherwise your stuff won't run, and you can always make these parametric. So if I continued, I would simply go down here and say, repeating what I just said to it, create a more. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go here and type down in here, as long as this little arrow's here, and I'm going to say create a more complex script in a similar way. And let's see what's the generate for us. And as it does that, I will start to set up my grasshopper. If I pull it out, I should be able to grab my Python node and have it ready. And this is yet again another more complicated script. But what is it doing off to the side? It is simply trying to, here's a more complex script that creates a torus and a surface for Rhino 3D using Rhino geometry namespace. What a wonderful way to learn how to script, to learn Rhino Common, to learn the Rhino geometry namespace. It's being written out, and then you have a torus and you have a surface because that's what's returned. And you can try this. You can go in here and you can say, okay, but I bet there's something wrong. I can say, here's where I want to see the surface, right? Actually, I think this is where I want to see the, actually, I'll see the surface first. And it's still explaining things in English to me, but I'm getting less human and more AI oriented. We're going to take a surface and we're going to take a torus. And I'll bet you this has a bug in it, and I doubt very much I'm going to solve it right now because I'll play around with it and not waste your time. But everything looks like it might be working. It could have some problems with this NURB surface create, but it's a Rhino geometry tool, so function. So maybe, but you see this torus has 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll bet making a torus doesn't require 4 arguments. So let's go in here, copy this script. And this is similar to what I saw happening in Blender, but I wanted to see it in Grasshopper. I was very excited. So the scripting in Blender, I thought, well, let's just script it over in Grasshopper and see what happens. So I'm going to pull this back over here. I'm going to scrap this all. I'm going to hit edit, and there's no quick cut and paste. You got to paste it in. I want to see the surface, and I want to see the torus. I'm going to hit test. And we have the same problem. There it is. It takes 3 arguments and it's given 4. So now I have to go back, and I anticipated this because I'm just learning. And honestly, I'm just learning as I go. So I'm going to have to find out what's the problem with the center, normal, major radius, and minor radius. I'll bet very much that that's a similar problem that was occurring up here because it was wanted 2 parameters instead of 3. And as things get more difficult, you've learned how to solve them simpler, and you will continue to go. Now, you're not doing some wonderful things. You're literally just making toruses and things like this, but you are using chat OpenAI to learn how to script beautifully and then customize it from Grasshopper into Rhino. Very excited about this. Stay tuned. I'll be going live probably for a little while on this because it's so exciting, and I will just play around until I get bored with ghpython and Python 2.0 and I want to use more complex libraries, and then I'll start playing in Visual Studio Code. I may get a Flask server going with hops. There may be another alternative that may actually not be important at all or essential to do, but I'll find a way to start dealing in Python 3.0 in building geometries into Rhino. Now the thing is, this is so you can use it parametrically, bringing it into Grasshopper, because otherwise you could just sit over here in Rhino, which is fantastic. I think I just clicked the wrong one and I got a cool Unity environment going in the background. Let's just pull Grasshopper over here. What I've seen is people just going into where was it? Pan, render, where am I thinking? Tools, Rhino. I've seen people go right into Python script and the editor and simply use the editor. Oops, I lost it. It's on my other computer. Let me grab that one. And simply put your code right into the Python script editor so you can generate directly into Rhino. But if you do that, you got to write your whole script out, hope that it plays out, doesn't hit any bugs, and then you can't make it parametric and you can't link up nodes and make it more complex. I think I'm one of the few people doing this online. In these first week of Chat GPT being out, I've seen a lot of people starting to play with it in the Rhino script Python editor, but I have not seen a lot of people putting it into the Rhino Grasshopper environment with ghpython. So yes, I've had an interest with the hops Flask server to get into more complex libraries, and I've tried to move around from ghpython, but I host so many groups on Facebook. If you don't know, Michael Wickerson, and I put everything on my YouTube channel. I've got Patreon, I've got GitHub. Everything's chaotic, but you almost don't need, I mean, you might need a developer, which is kind of what I'm slipping into doing now, but I actually think I like teaching people and teaching students that this is available for you to learn all of yourself. So I'm going to work out this 4 arguments where it says, you know, I'm not happy with the 4 arguments. I just want at most 3. That's one of the bugs that I think, because working in Rhino Common and going into C# and things like this, you can find that you work on many different constructors instead of just thinking about this one. Overloading, I think it's called, or something like that. I have to check with parametric camp to figure out what I'm doing there. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm going to pull up my OBS, stop streaming, and stop recording.